Hi, my name is Edowaye Aiyanyor, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the limits executive authority, Jefferson, and the Constitution. Since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the democratic experiment of the United States of America has been conducted in the laboratory of Delima. The immensity of this challenge has varied greatly from age to age, but in the nation's earliest years, it looms particularly large. The decision made by the heirs of the revolution in leading a young republic were not only made in the interest of survival and growth, but also with an understanding and respect for the power of precedents. The founders believed that centuries down the road, successors would follow in their footsteps, lending to their position and highest demands of responsibility. President Thomas Jefferson was no exemption to this rule. Throughout Jefferson's first term as President of the United States, 1801 to 1809, the status of Louisiana Territory, owned by a wartime government in France, continually shifted from threats to assets. Such instability on the doorstep of the United States was a source of great concern for Jefferson. And when the chance arose to obtain the huge tract of land at a bargain price, 15 million, he jumped at the opportunity. The benefits were multifaceted. The threat of a war-mongering French Emperor Napoleon would be removed. The size of United States would literally quadruple overnight. The incalculable riches of West would be at the disposal of the new nation. But one significant obstacle lay in the path of such opportunity: Jefferson's dedication to the letter of the law, his strict construction of the US Constitution. In his political economy, the Constitution contained no specific authority to acquire Louisiana or any foreign territory. Jefferson faced a key question which echoes down to our own time. Can the federal government take an action that it is not specifically authorized to do? More to the point, does the Constitution represent the beginning of federal authority or the end? Jefferson wrestled with this question over many months of soul searching. The nation wrestled with this question till today as the constitutional debate over COVID and federal relief from eviction for renters rages on. According to his most prominent biographer, Dumas Malone, Jefferson was less rigid in action than he often appeared to be in theory. Nevertheless, his entire career demonstrated his reference for law, especially fundamental law as embodied in Constitution. As such, Jefferson's journey in this issue began initially with voicing his constitutional scruples to his closest advisor. Quoted in 1970, page 311, in the time of the founders, leading politicians wrote letters to one another on a daily basis, which gives the contemporary student a window into Jefferson's mind. This speech will use writers to examine Jefferson's reasoning. Internal debates within Jefferson's cabinet demonstrated the difficulties associated with the limits of executive authorities. Under the Constitution, Jefferson's Attorney General, Levi Lincoln, noted the consequence of some constitutional and some political embarrassments, with a direct acquisition of a foreign territory by the government of the United States might occasion. His concern was that the Constitution placed the United States and any possible new states within the limits of the existing United States, which at the time was only 16 in number. He believed there was no explicit pathway for incorporating any new territory outside of the states that signed the Constitution. On the other hand, Albert Gallatin, Jefferson's Secretary of the Treasury, thought such a doctrine to be ridiculous. He argued that if it was unconstitutional for the federal government to acquire territory, it would equally be unconstitutional for the federal government to purchase any number of other things not listed in the documents, like ink or paper. He argued for the inherent right of the nation to acquire territory, either of admitting into the union as a new state with the consent of the state or of making regulations for the government of such territory, quoted in Brown, page 15. Jefferson responded to Gallatin by noting that the purchase power made sense, but concluded, I think it will be safer not to permit the enlargement of the Union, but by amendment of the Constitution. And he continued to press this theory. On July 17, 1803, Jefferson wrote to his friend William Dover that Congress would be obliged to ask the people for an amendment of the Constitution, authorizing their receiving the province into the Union and providing for its government, quoted in Ford, page 113. On August 19, Jefferson wrote to his friend John Dixon, the general government has no power but such as the Constitution has given it, and it has not given it a power of holding foreign territory, and still less of incorporating it into the Union. An amendment of the Constitution seems necessary for this, quoted in Ford, page 262. Everest Brown notes constitutional difficulties and expediency, the good of the country, were conflicting in Jefferson's mind, quoted in Ford, page 262. And Jefferson's mind was moving fast, writing to Senator John Breckinridge on August 12. Jefferson moved the ball forward, though it was an act beyond the Constitution, an unauthorized federal government for the good of their country was still obligated to the people to do what we know they would have done for themselves, they being in a situation to do it, quoted in Ford, page 244. As Jefferson's fatherly sense of duty to preserve and strengthen the public increased, his concern over constitutionality began to wane. On August 23rd, Jefferson told Albert Gallatin, it would be well to say as little as possible on the Constitution difficulty, and that Congress should act on it without talking, quoted in De Conde, page 184. To Secretary of State James Madison, he said, I infer that the less we say about the constitutional difficulties respecting Louisiana, the better. 184. Indeed, Jefferson still wished to do something, and that was to draft and pass a constitutional amendment. No prototype he produced, however, contained any mention of acquisition. Jefferson had finally coincided in the point by simply dropping it. His draft amendment dealt only with incorporation of the territory onto the Union and incorporation of its inhabitants as US citizens. Malone notes, however, the supremely important consideration was the removal of foreign danger and the consequent freedom of America experiment in the self-government to take its own course, page 317. And so the Jefferson administration approved the federal purchase of Louisiana in the treaty with France. Afterwards, Congress commenced debates on the details of the treaty on October 24, 1803. Congressional debate focused on incorporation of Louisiana into the Union and its inhabitants as citizens, and votes were cast almost exclusively along party lines. Republicans at the time, the forerunners of the modern Democratic Party, supported statehood, while the institutional federalists favored territory status, and the serious reservation concerning instant citizenship for residents of Louisiana. Yet, one of young senator from Massachusetts stood apart as chief opponents to most points of the purchase. Though criticized for opposition perceived by some to be chiefly partisan and reflective of family rivalries, future President John Quincy Adams quickly criticized the purchase as an assumption of implied power greater in itself and more comprehensive in its consequence than all the assumption of implied powers in the years of Washington and Adams and the administration put together. Quoted in Malone, page 331. In the end, however, the Republicans won the debate and Congress approved the purchase, which by this time was immensely popular with the American people. Years later, reflecting on the purchase, Jefferson wrote, "A strict observance of the written law is doubtless one of the high duties of a good citizen, but it is not the highest. The law of necessity, of self-preservation, of saving our country when in danger, of higher obligation to lose our country by a scrupulous adherence to written law, would be to lose the law itself with life, liberty, property, and all those who are enjoying them with us. Thus, absurdly sacrificing the ends to the means, the unwritten laws of necessity and self-preservation and the public safety control the written laws," quoted in Mayor, page 252. Throughout the summer of 1803, Jefferson sought a solution to what he believed was a constitutional logjam. And in the end, he drew the line at his own peril. Certain of his motives, he remained true and consistent to his most cherished values concerning governments. Although he expanded the power of the executive branch in so doing, he placed the necessity of national preservation over the silence of the Constitution on a big question of territorial expansion. He strove tirelessly to be true to his own self and left behind a concern by the president of the constitutionality of his own action, which probably has not been matched in American history, Mayor 256. In our time, we can see that this debate continues, as President Joe Biden said on August 3rd, 2021, concerning the COVID eviction moratorium. The bulk of the constitutional scholars says it's not likely to pass constitutional muster. Yet, Biden decided to extend the moratorium anyway, noting that some constitutional scholars think otherwise. While certainly not as elegant as Jefferson's reasoning on the question of constitutionality, Biden's decision echoes that of Jefferson, who conceded in 1803 that the Constitution did not permit him to take a step he believed was necessary. Presidents sometimes forge their decisions in the interest of the common good, quoted in Blake, page A1. Thank you.